Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's FIBERTalk webinar in our series of this FIBERTalk webinar initiative. So today our webinar topic will be work smarter, not harder when activating and maintaining GPON and XGSPON networks. As the topic says, we will be focusing more on GPON and XGSPON networks today, and the maintenance and activation of these types of latest technology networks. So today we have with us Matthew Zahra from Viavi Solutions. Matthew has been part of Viavi CIPT team since 2016. He is the APAC Regional Product Line Manager, team lead responsible for business unit activities throughout the Asia Pacific region, and has 20 years of experience in the IT and telecommunications technology industry internationally. Having grown in a highly technical and entrepreneurial influenced environment, Matt is very passionate about business efficiencies and technology innovation. His main objective is to provide long-term and mutually beneficial business relationships within the telecommunications technology sector. So Matthew has been involved with numerous projects in the sector at various organization levels. The projects ranged across various scales, with a whole variety of telco technologies, including transmission technologies in fiber optic, RF, HFC, and copper DSL networks. He has successfully implemented solutions that have proved to increase productivity and operational performance during the various stages of network life cycle. So today our webinar will be of total 50 to 55 minutes. So we will now move to the main presentation will be done by Matthew Zahra, and then we will have a Q&A session like 10 to 15 minutes based on the questions we get, and then we will finish today. So I will now welcome Matthew Zahra for his presentation. Please, Matthew, welcome.
Thanks, Rusafi. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Hope you are doing well as well.
Yeah, we're doing great here, thanks. It's warming up in Sydney, Australia now.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Just let me know, Rusafi, please, when you can see my screen.
Sure. I'm here. Yeah, this is in full screen mode now. We can see the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So thank you all today for joining us for this webinar. I'm very humbled to be here today to present some of the latest ways of how we can become efficient and smart about testing networks. We see the evolution happening, and I hope this presentation will provide to be of value to you. And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to proceed with the next slide. All right. So first, we're going to start covering a little bit about, where is this drive for more fiber PON build coming from? It's been happening over quite a bit of time. However, there's been different cycles of technologies, and at the moment we're experiencing a bit of a phenomenon. I'm sure we all live in the same world with the term COVID on the top of our minds at the moment, and this new world is getting us to experience a different form of a new norm, and with that we are seeing a lot of changes. So for instance, to start off with today, for instance, I'm presenting this webinar from home, and this is becoming more and more the norm, where working from home is an acceptable method. And it's not just about work. We also interact with our families now a little bit more over web. For me, it hasn't changed much because my family is overseas in Malta, but this is becoming something of a little bit more the usual thing for everyone else. Shopping is also, as we will see in the presentation, one of the new trends that we are seeing. So what I'm trying to get with this is that, more than ever, people, households, everyone that has or had access to internet, more and more they require something that is stable and reliable. If we used to experience, perhaps in the past, sometimes where we see a wheel or loading a page, or we get a disconnect, perhaps we'd wave it off, go make a cup of tea, or get a cup, get some water or something. Because we are now in front of the screens more, if we see that wheel going, it's becoming more and more frustrating. We're experiencing this more and more. So that is something that we need to eliminate, and all operators are aware of this, and also the regulators are working very hard at enabling different technologies and accelerating all this. So fortunately to us, the optical technologies, GPON, XGSPON, offer very good optical resilience and immunity to most of the elements that would impact other technologies. Now, as we discussed, for instance, there is a higher demand for speed as well. From some of the reports that I've been reading, there are operators with an amazing increase of 60%, for instance, in IP traffic, which happened, as we can see in the graph there, between September 2019 and March 2020. So if you compare both those two data points, there's been that hike of 60% increase in traffic. Now, this could be many things, as we discussed, but predominantly it will be your UHD broadcasts. The video technology hasn't stopped evolving, always demanding more and more throughput. Your subscriptions of Stan and Netflix and what have you keep our networks very busy. So with that streaming video growth, everything becomes a little bit more congested, and different parts of the network are experiencing different upgrades as we go. Today, we're going to look at the last mile of those networks, which many times become a bottleneck. So you can have a very good backhaul type infrastructure, but if your last mile isn't in shape, then you're gonna be running in trouble. And also with the different technologies and some of the legacy ones, there is a very good loading now as well on the upstream side. So it's not just the downloading or the downstream, like what we said, the UHD broadcasts and so on. So for me to be talking to you all on the camera, I'm sending up packets into the network. So the upstream at the moment is probably running a little bit heavy. I am also using a 1080p HD camera, so it's not shy of using the throughput I have available. So video calls, upload to cloud, and what have you. Okay. So we touched a little bit on, or I mentioned a little bit on the shopping side, and this is something that is fascinating because you wouldn't think how quick things are changing around us, and us as humans, we react and we respond to things you know, especially if things get disrupted, things that we like doing or things which are necessities to us. So I was reading a bit of a report on the Capital Confidence Barometer, and you know, they interviewed a range of companies, retail companies, and 68% of those, would you believe it, they are prioritizing any new investment they have in basically upping their digital side, their e-commerce sites, making sure that they have redundancies. Also, inquiring and looking on how they can, you know, enhance the online shopping experience, you know, adding some virtual reality, maybe some AI, and so on and so forth. You know, this is the Internet of Things we have tagged. And you know, the first two in this race, or the first few in this race, will be the winners, because at the end of the day, you know, people buy through experiences, and if you can give them a better experience during that time, definitely you're standing to be at an advantage. And you know, all of this drives networks to their limits as well. Now, in spite of all this, we were also going through a phase of fiber deep, in any case, even pre-COVID. So we've been talking about, you know, strategy to move from your DSL, your GFast, or what have you, or cable in cable areas. Now, how can we make them fiber deeper? And most of the operators that I work with already have that strategy in place. It's a very fine line. You can't just chop and change, because you have disruptions, you have limitations of workforce. There's a lot of money involved. So the transition needs to be smooth, but it's happening. And you know, this also keeps then putting more pressure on the demand for technicians, for civil works, and so on and so forth. Another type of PON build, apart from your greenfields and your brownfields evolution, is the concept to run 5G over PON or other wireless technologies as well. And there is a motivation by operators to achieve some sort of an optimal point to have a front haul transport as well, being broadcasted through a PON type network. Now, in spite again of all this, as we know, at the same time, we need to limit or minimize exposure for the front people, right? So we need to minimize the need for technicians to you know, go out and run their installs and maintenance. It's impossible to not get them going, because it's, you know, there's some physical work that needs to be done, of course, in building a network. So my point is that it's never been more important than now to, you know, have a systematic process in place to, you know, reduce truck rolls and have things done right first time. All right, so moving on, we have been seeing for a long time, right? A lot of pressure on fiber to the home and PON builds. And the graph on the left, sorry, basically shows us what level of household penetration there is by country, and that's just the countries that have already more than 1% household penetration. And as you can see, there's a lot of room there for build, a lot of opportunity. So some countries more than others, they're still very short on the number of FTTH or FTTB subscribers. You know, so eventually, as time goes by, you know, these countries will need to, they probably do have a plan, but they need to accelerate a lot of the FTTH subscribers to be able to get the benefits, and not have different people, prejudiced with different type of networks. And operators do know this, and they get it. So typically what happens, some operators have no choice but to, cost cut or reduce things, maybe cut some corners. And one of the things we see, which has been happening a little bit, is this minimal test approach for building networks. And this is because, there's this deployment pressure. Things need to roll on and they need to be built, and this is what ends up happening. But what we see as we'll go on through the presentation is that there is up to 50% of homes that actually don't pass from the first install. So you think you have 10 homes rolled out and passed, you go to move to the next stage of the network build or service activation or what have you, and you find that only 5 of them are actually capable of running the service. Apart from that, we have reports of early or premature failures. In the next 30 days after an install, there is around 5% or more of failures that happen as well. And this is on top of the immediate failures that are seen. What's happening, techs, of course, get blamed. They don't meet their APIs. They're not closing enough jobs per day. The pressure keeps building up. At the end, as an operator, you get a bad rep. Your customers complain. They leave, they churn, they go on to someone else to try their luck elsewhere, and this just creates a whole roll-on effect of troubleshooting expenses, unnecessary OPEX expenditure, and your ROI just goes down the hill. So, as I've been saying, making money in fiber is challenging. It's there, but operators do face these issues. And let me remind everyone that most operators, they have investors, and investors look at their return. So if they see, I've got a picture there of cash being burnt. If they see an operator just burning cash and they're not seeing that cash flow coming back, they're not seeing the revenues going up, it's going to become problematic. And we all know that it takes a long time to roll out massive FTTH and PON builds. And revenues will only start when you have customers connected and subscribed and paying. So the typical operator, if everything goes to plan, they already have their ROI marked at 15 to 20 years, right? So that's challenging in itself, and it's a big sell to appeal to investors. But let's say that gets done, operators need to convince that they have the maintenance under control, that the technology, whether it's changing new gear at the ends of fiber, it's under control. Technology with new competition as well is covered, and they don't have as much ARPU erosion. So these are all challenges that operators have to justify. So one way is to make sure they show and maximize that their asset life is beyond the 20 years. It's there to last, at least the fiber portion. There isn't much technology changing with the passive stuff. And perhaps they can show that the maintenance is under control, it's being minimized, and especially where there is new civil engineering works, we all know how disruptive that can be, and the cost can go out of control. So in other words, again, they know that they have to do it right the first time, do it smarter, and perhaps as they wanted, do it faster still, but maybe without compromising on that quality build. Now let's have a look at some of the considerations and challenges we face. The typical current test procedures when performing a cable drop, an installation. So I think for the people out there that do this work, we can all agree that a big chunk of the network failure cases comes from having dirty connectors or damaged connectors. Fiber connectors, and fiber itself is a very delicate technology. It's glass. It can get easily scratched or easily damaged or becomes dirty. The environments we lay fiber and we terminate and put connectors on and so on is not ideal. We're not in lab environments. We're out in the field, on the streets, in the back of our vans doing all this work. So that becomes a very big pain point, not having or having a very minimal connector inspection to our disposal. The other one would be bed splices. Again, the environments for splicing, in an ideal world, they would have a very clean environment, and unfortunately that doesn't happen. So with that, you never know. I mean, you get some view or from the splice quality from the splicer itself, but you don't really have a systemic link qualification process if you don't have a test methodology behind it. And at the end of the day, you don't know either if you're connected at the splitter cabinet or if you're connected to the right port. So, some operators take the decision that, hey, we're not going to equip anyone with OTDRs or any other expensive or complicated tools. We're just going to limit the test, maybe give them a red light laser, a VFL, and a power meter. They can check the light, they can check the continuity, and off they go. However, the reality is, as we discussed, what we see with the failure rate, that just doesn't work. Okay, case example, a bit of a story. Let's take Joe. He's a technician at Pontec. He shows up at Vipin's residence at 10:15 a.m. He opens up a demarcation point at the side of a house and proceeds to check for light on the fiber with a power meter. There's no light. So what does Joe do? He pulls out his pocket VFL, connects it to the fiber, and of course there's no inspection done before or after. Joe goes to the pedestal, maybe 200 meters or so from the house, and he bends the fiber to see if there's a bit of a leak there and check if it's the right one. And he concludes that he can't see any light coming through. So he assumes it must be a break, right? So he goes on Vipin, tells him, Vipin, I'm sorry, I can't install your internet today. And that's a very typical situation when you have premise technicians that go out there with minimal tools. As long as something is going okay, it's okay. But the minute that there's something that is, beyond our control or unexpected, things get stuck and things just get delayed, as we'll see later on. So we'll leave that story there for now. Let's see some facts. So there's been a few surveys done by Heavy Reading, and these are very interesting questions that were asked. So one of the first questions was, what is your company's typical rate of first-time install failures for FTTH PON services? And this is global, huh? So these are global companies. And interestingly enough, if let's say we allow 10%, okay, let's allow 10% of failure rate. Everyone's human. We don't live in a perfect world, so maybe 10% is good enough. Even with that, we get 50% of homes that don't pass. at the first turn up. Two out of three of those are due to technical issues, right? So this is where we draw our our numbers are based on facts by these surveys that are run with operators. Okay, and then what we also read is that, as I mentioned before, there is an early or premature failure rate of the said networks. And another interesting question that we asked was, to select, or not we, whoever the source I'm reading, it was to select the top 3 challenges that their network faces. And again, there is various reasons they're outlined. But interestingly, there's a 40.9 and a 50.4% when it comes for education, training of their own labor workforce or their contractors. So what's that saying is that it's challenging for them to allocate time or resources or money to have their technicians or the contractors trained properly. So there's this double-edged sword where you really should be training people, but you really should have your people out there building the network. And this is where we come in to try and help with these sort of challenges. So in our view, our testing for success criteria would be, we give a recommendation for PON service install as a test process. Will take a couple of minutes. First, we of course recommend we have the mantra IBYC, inspect before you connect. So we definitely recommend that every fiber connector is inspected on both fiber cables, on bulkheads, whatever you have. Remember, if you have dirt on one side, you connect it, it will transfer dirt on the other side. So now you have 2 dirty connectors, and on and on. So if you inspect, clean if needed, let's say that takes a minute. Ideally, you then run a GPON or XGSPON measurement to check the light, check that the level of that light is right, that there's adequate power coming into the ONT, allowing into the budgets for degradation over time, so on and so forth. And one other recommendation we have, apart from just getting the light reading, is to qualify the fiber link. So you have a technician out there, and you're gonna take another minute to get the technician to give you a birth certificate, right? It will show you all the elements, if the splices have been done proper, if the connectors have the right reflectance levels, if they're passing through all the light. We can have all this done in a methodological way where we can run pass-fail analysis, so they get greens or reds. And it takes me longer to say this than actually doing the test. So all of this will take a minute plus another minute, so 2 minutes, which it will be very minimal time added, using something like a VIAVI Optimator versus what today's processes are, especially in light of those 50% failure rates. So one has to think about the gains that 2 minutes will give you in the long run. And I did mention the Optimator. So here we have VIAVI come up with an interesting development, and we're actually launching it today. The Optimator is our fiber certification tool. So with the Optimator, you can do the inspection for the end phase connection. You can do your fiber routing tracing and see the light levels. You can also locate faults, and you'll have a link map view of the elements, and also certification. You can have a report produced by the tool, and all of this can be done in the field. The Optimeter also connects to a cloud solution that we have called StrataSync. It also connects to smartphones, and you can append more data from your phone, location, maybe a picture of what you are testing, and so on and so forth. And all of that gets all embedded in the same report. Okay, within the Optimeter, we have a new app called Optitrack. So what Optitrack does, you would tell it where you are as in a test location. Are you at the ONT side? Are you at the splitter side? And which direction you're shooting, okay? You give it the job ID number, and that's all it takes. You clean you inspect, clean the fiber, you plug it in, you get a GPON reading or an XGSPON reading, depending on what services you have running on that fiber. You get the light level results. When that's done, you hit the play button, and the Optimeter will run and give you a link map view of the elements it is seeing, and it gives you that up to the splitter, and it passes or fails the elements one by one and shows you if it is within your test parameters or not. If there's issues, you can click on any of those elements and the Optimeter will give you recommendations. So it will give the technicians recommendations of what could be wrong and what the next action step should be. Everything is on the same screen. So we have one fiber test tool, which requires one key press. You connect it once and you get all this certification for the install. And if troubleshooting is required, you'll see all of this happening in front of you in less than a minute. Okay, and most importantly, it's validating your link that it is in actual fact connected to the splitter, and also through the splitter all the way up to the OLT. Okay, so this is very good, valuable information a technician can have on site as they are doing the build. So now we look at the FTTH service turn up again, and we see that we have fiber connectors which have a health verification. We see the verification of the routing as well of that fiber, light levels, and certification of the whole link, right? So we have a fully qualified link. Works on GPON, XGSPON, and also we have different type of test results which are outputted from the Optimeter. Can have a PDF for report. We also output a JSON, which helps us with the StrataSync analytics that it can provide you as well as a .tsor file format, which basically is the file format for the Optimeter. And like I mentioned, you can have images on the report from your connectors as well. Okay, so coming back to the story, Joe opened up a job ticket. Remember, Joe only had a VFL, maybe a power meter in hand. So he had to open a job ticket for the maintenance team to come out, test the drop from Vipin's house to the pedestal, and maybe get respliced or change some things or what have you. And that was done after 6 weeks because they were put in a queue. Simply because the maintenance team is very busy fixing 50% of all those failure rates. So after those 6 weeks, another technician would have come out, like Joe in the first place, or maybe Joe, and he would have tried again to turn up the service. So all in all, it took only 8 weeks, and that's if everything went to plan. That's what would have happened, but had they checked and had they have an Optimeter available to them, they would have saw all the elements going back to the splitter. They would have seen the ones with issues, and also would have seen beyond the splitter if they could see an OLT or no. And probably they would have been done by the same day at lunchtime. As it turns, Joe had a wrong connection at the splitter, plugging it into the wrong port, apart from a couple of element connectors there in the way being problematic as well. So all that could have been identified and explored on the same day. Couple of hours, job would have been done, and the customer would be happy, and the operator would have been making money 8 weeks before. So that's the fiber portion of our recommendations. We now look a little bit at the, again, PON service activation, but from a traffic turn up and troubleshooting perspective. So let's say all the light maybe worked well, or maybe there's another scenario, again, in a no test where we have some issues. And the typical issues for these installs can happen in the different places. Could be a wrong fiber on the OLT, just like Joe had. It could be a fiber drop, which is kinked or broken. So you could have no light, maybe not enough light with that. Going back to the drop terminal connection, you could have the wrong light. And if all that was good, then past the ONT, let's say up to the ONT is working fine, then you could have issues with service, with the service layer on top. When it comes to the Ethernet layer, you could have bad Wi-Fi. Depends on, as an operator or as a technician, what the demarcation point or what the level of experience you want to give to your customers. But there could be all these sort of issues in a typical scenario, right? And from a technician point of view, they waste time, with trying to figure out what's wrong. They're not sure what it is. Customers again get unhappy, and the operator, the service provider doesn't know exactly what's happening. They have no way of identifying what's going on. Okay. So for this, we have a product called Viavi. We call it Companion, or the NSC100. And as you can see, it is a faceless device. It connects to your smart device, your tablet, phone, or whatever you would have. We have an app called FIBERTalk app, and the NSC connects to that app. Again, here we are talking about productivity, optimization, work efficiencies. So we can run 3 different tests, which will take 1 minute each. One at the GPON on the fiber. Then we can connect on the Ethernet on your RJ45 or whatever cable you have. And then we can also run a test on the Wi-Fi. So you can qualify basically end to end what's going on. The NSC has capability to run your PON IDs, your optical power meter levels as well, and basically you can close out from a PON perspective. Then you can move the NSC and run a speed test over Ethernet. You can validate the physical layer as well for the Ethernet, and the same can happen on Wi-Fi. And if technicians now had this this type of tool and this visibility, what I was looking for, now they can have tests done in the different areas of the network. They can open one job ID, have different tests. They know they're on the right fiber. They have good light coming in. The service at the Ethernet layer, the physical connection is running the maximum throughput. And then maybe they can qualify room by room Wi-Fi, and they can show the different data rates throughput through the different rooms, and qualify this with the customer, with the operator, and basically go on from this. And all it takes again is 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute in the 3 different locations. Right, and this is the way we see to create proper processes, by having the technician efficiencies, customer satisfactions, and visibility to the operator. Okay, what technicians need is simple devices, one button, 1 minute, 1 screen type tools, producing 1 report. They hand it over to the customer, they email it to the operator, just to show what their network that they've tested looks like. And if I may take a little bit more time on this, I can show a bit of an animation on what the NSC would be doing, basically. So we've taken a few video screen shares of us running different networks, different tests. So on the first one on the left, we have an NSC running a 1-check PON, and then in the middle we have 1-check Ethernet being performed, and on the right we have the Wi-Fi 1-check being tested. And as I said before, you would open up one job in the job manager and you move through the different type tests, right? And all of this will be collated and reported into a single report. As you can see, there was only one action the technician had to do after inputting the job ID, which is press the play button, and the rest is done by itself. And this is basically how we qualify networks as a service traffic on, with the different speed test mechanisms that we have. We can run, you know, everyone is familiar with speed test by Ookla, and this is what we're running here. And you'll notice, for instance, that the throughput speeds are different between the Ethernet and Wi-Fi, and you can explain to customers about the different chipsets and about the different technologies and the limitations they have. But you can demarcate, okay, the Ethernet, you're getting your 1 gig. If you're lucky enough to have 1 gig coming into the home, and then you're going to experience some throughput degradation through the different technologies. Okay, getting 600 up and down is not bad over Wi-Fi by itself as well. So that's basically how an NSC would help a technician. And I've mentioned StrataSync before, and I just wanted to conclude with this one. All of our tools, all of our vision today going forward is about operators becoming more efficient, having productive workforces, and this is what we are enabling on all our tools. All of our tools today being designed are compatible to StrataSync. They connect to mobile tech app, and they create a whole test process automation. If that's something that, and I hope it is after a presentation like this, if that's important for the operators and they see value. And with that, I bring my presentation to the conclusion. Rusafi.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for a nice presentation. So it really had nice contents with the business profitability increase. So I think audience really enjoyed that. So we will move on to a short Q&A session now. To all the audience, if you have any questions or queries to the presentation, or any generalized questions to Matthew, or on the topic, please type that in the control panel, so in the questions section of the control panel. We will try our best to discuss with the speaker. So with this, we will move to the Q&A session now. So let's see. So based on your presentation, I had three questions. Matthew, maybe I can start the Q&A with those questions.
Sure.
So my first question would be you already mentioned the file format, I think. Okay, so is it possible to run a speed test over GPON with the NSC? Matthew, please.
Okay, very good. Yes. So with the NSC, we have the capability to perform a speed test, from the get-go on the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet points of interconnect of the NSC. If we connect to the GPON, we can surely run a speed test as well. There is some work which would be needed with the operator, of course, because something I didn't mention, the NSC has the capability to also emulate ONTs. So we can create profiles on the NSC. So that will be done in conjunction with the operator. And then they will have another layer of tests, perhaps, that they can eliminate an ONT, plug in the NSC or the companion onto the network via GPON, and perform an UCLA speed test directly from there. And then they can demarcate and say, okay, so up to the fiber, up to the ONT, everything is working fine. I'm getting your 1 gig if 1 gig is what you are on, and everything is sweet there. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, and another question regarding the battery capacity of the Optimator. So how long does it last?
Well,
and,
that's
yeah, please.
Yeah, so in terms of battery, it's always a tricky question. How much do you use your Optimeter? How do you use it? But in general, I would say 20 hours of work time is what you can expect from the Optimeter. Now, how you use those 20 hours is up to you. You can use it out over a couple of days or over a week, or depends on how long you
Workload.
take.
Yeah, I understand. So
20
does
hours.
it come?
That's the answer. 20 hours.
Okay, got it. So does it come with VFL?
It can. So we offer. So we still see the VFL as being an effective part of the test. If you need to run some simple quick verification of a piece of fiber, the VFL is still a good tool. In fact, we do offer it as an accessory. It can be embedded onto the Optimeter as well, optionally, yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, my next question would be, can the Optimeter detect a splitter? What about WLT and ONT?
Yes, so as I've said, we can detect the splitter, so that you'd have to be on the ONT side shooting upstream. So you can detect the splitter, and it will also tell you that you are connected to the OLT. Of course, because it sees light coming downstream from the OLT, so that verifies that it can see the splitter and beyond. If you change over the direction, so if you go on the splitter side and you connect down into the premise, we can also detect, yes, if an ONT is present in the home. And that's a very good question, because it's not always easy to make an appointment and get access to the premise. Sometimes it could be very challenging to actually get yourself a permission or make an appointment where someone is going to be in the premise and let you in. So with the Optimeter, there is no need for that, because you can detect an ONT without accessing the premise. Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's really nice. So I think that was some questions from my side. So I am not seeing any questions from the audience yet. So
okay, maybe it was very clear for everyone.
yeah, that makes sense. So just to audience, so if you have any queries, I will send Matthew's email to everyone, so you can just directly contact him and just ask about any questions or any queries. So with these, we'd like to conclude today's webinar. So I'd like to really thank to the speaker Matthew Zahra for your time and a nice presentation. So we will have more webinars coming in the coming days during our most challenging time of the world. We really would like to thank to all of the audience as well. And this webinar's recording will be available to all of our audience as well, maybe after 48 hours later. So with this, I'd like to say goodbye today. Thank you everyone again. Thank you Matthew again. So okay, let's call it a day today. Thank you,
Very much.
Matthew.
Nice day.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.